Welcome back to Death, Judgment, Resurrection, the series which is concluding today. We planned to have this series. We always do a similar series between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, so that you can plan for next year to be with us during the high holidays. The Yom Kippur starts actually on Tuesday night. Here in our congregation, we will have Monday night a special service, Yom Kippur, which is going to be a short, because we're gonna do only a short liturgy, but instead of message, I would like to remind all of you to come to watch a special film, which is it's not a comedy, it's not an entertainment, but it is definitely gonna open your eyes to the understanding of what Jewish people went through. The movie is called From Hell to Hell. So I encourage you to come for the screening here at 7 o'clock on Monday. Well, we've made a full circle. We talked about three major subjects which are connected with the days of awe, the days of repentance, the days of judgment. The subject of anthropology, which is the nature of man. Then we talked about the subject of eschatology, the nature of the last day events. But we started, and we will finish this series on the subject of theodicy. Theodicy is about justice of God. We talked about theodicy when we discussed the story of Job. Today, we're back into theodicy. After we know when the judgment happens, when people will inherit eternal life and kingdom, after the coming of Jesus, after we understand that if we talk about survival of only soul, it means we are badly lost. I was watching recently an interesting, documentary on Midway. And basically, there was a battle which turned the tide in the Pacific theater with Japan. But nevertheless, even though Japanese lost their carrier fleet, the Yorktown was also lost. So it wasn't a complete 10-0 victory. Well, God promises the victory 10-0. It means we don't lose anything. God created us with body, spirit, and soul. There's not going to be 3-1 or 3-2 victory. It's going to be 10-0. We'll get back everything. And conversely, as we read in the book of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 28, those wicked who are judged and found guilty, everything will be punished, both soul and body. Now we know that's Gehenna, or Gehinnom. But the question that bothers me, and it bothers many people, and that's how it is connected with theodicy. It's the question of the execution of verdict. You know, I tell you, when you look at the history of how Nazis were tried at Nuremberg, trial is definitely a good closure and victory. It's a victory for the Allies and closure for those victims of the war crimes that Nazis committed. But when you watch this, trial is fine, but then they film actual hanging. And I don't know if, I don't know how it was back in the Middle Ages, where public executions, public beheadings, public hangings. There were even worse execution. You know, some of the crimes were punishable by being boiled in some boiling lead or something. Or I mean, what? And if you think about this, the executions were not happening at the prison backyard. It was happening in the middle of the city, in the central square. It's interesting, in Moscow, Red Square, right? Everybody knows that. But right in the middle, across the beautiful Savior Tower, which is used by the official government, there is this old platform, round platform, that existed there since probably Ivan the Terrible, or even before. It's called the Forehead Place. And why the Forehead Place? Because that's how you do. You lay your forehead on the floor, and then the axe cuts your head. This was the place for public beheadings. It's interesting. There was a famous peasant rebellion by Ivan Bolotnikov. Well, this is Russian Bolotnikov. The origin is totally different. But whenever my classmates or whoever knows Russian history hears Bolotnikov, it's always associated with this peasant rebel who was executed in front of the Kremlin and so forth. And they always ask, are you the descendant of Ivan Bolotnikov? No, this is Russian Bolotnikov. I am Jewish Bolotnikov, and my last name comes from the name of the village in Belarus. Because many Jewish last names come from just the place names. You know, so anyway, that's why the subject is, I mean, coming back, observing the public execution of the worst sociopath, does it give any enjoyment? I mean, you learn about this during the trial, you hate this, but when this sociopath is with his hands tied, is being actually put to death, I don't know if anybody today would actually enjoy watching the process. So, this is why my topic today is God looking for the bloody revenge over the wicked? So we talked sufficiently about the hope for the righteous, but what's happening with the hope for with the destiny of the wicked? Well, there are two different, things here, and there are two different theories. There is a theory about the everlasting punishment, right? And people who object this everlasting punishment theory, they always talk about, does God really enjoy the torture? And will the torture ever achieve anything? So this is a typical worst torture I bring. If you think this is the worst, inside the iron bull, that's not even the worst. This is the worst. That's the bucket with some kind of substance where a person is completely covered with it, and the flies come in, and that's even worse. This is a steak. A Syrian loved it, and it's probably one of the worst and most painful death. And this is probably one of the worst when this is a cage with rats. And you bring the fire to this cage, so rats have no escape. But in order to escape the fire, they need to eat through a flesh of the person being tortured. So think about the Middle Ages. Back in the, my favorite European city, after being enough in Paris and London and Amsterdam, I found that my favorite and the most beautiful architecture in Europe ever is in Prague. And, Bob will agree, we've been there together. But it's interesting, right in the central square of Prague, there is a very interesting museum. It's a museum of tortures. To see how it was. And so what are we going to do? The question is, what are we going to do? We're back to our chapter which we have studied, Matthew 25, when we talked about the sheep and the goats, and those who are on the right side, the sheep, come ye blessed, enjoy the kingdom. And those who are on the left, the goats, to them it says, go ye accursed into the everlasting fire. And here is a conclusion. These will go away into eternal punishment. In fact, if you look very carefully into the original Greek of this, you will discover that English smooths it out. You will discover that it's talking about not punishment, torment. And I'll show you these words more and more. So what are we going to do with this? You see, I began to speak about the two theories. One theory is a prevalent medieval theory that, yes, if you're wicked and you go into hell, your soul will be tormented there forever and ever. And if your soul will adjust to the hot temperature of the hellfire, there are enough demons with the pitchforks, and they will kick more coal or fuel to make sure that you never adjust to the temperature and you're never comfortable. Well, the time passed and liberal theology arose, and as we spoke, there is a pushback against the traditional medieval theories, and the idea was formed. I mentioned this name, a French theologian, Pierre Abelard, who basically talked that God never punishes anybody. We are suffering the consequences of our choices. There is a modern scholar who wrote extensively in this trend of thought, and some of you might have heard the name Graham Maxwell. So that's in the same trend. And the idea is what is called the annihilationism. In other words, the idea is this: God is not a sadist. He does not enjoy torturing anybody, and this is why the sinner will just be annihilated in front of God, because they pull the verse that God is a consuming fire. So, because sin is not compatible with God's presence, so sinner comes into the presence of God, and poof! What it may be likened, and what some of the preachers who subscribe to this theory actually compare it to, as a matter against antimatter. You know that there is an antimatter. In other words, in the world which we know and experience, atoms consist of positively charged nucleus and negatively charged electron. So electron is negatively charged. But in the physics of elementary particles, you have actually a positively charged particle, which is the same, which has otherwise the same property as electron. It's called positron. So the antimatter would consist with positively charged positrons and negatively charged antinuclei. What happens with the electrons negatively charged, they cannot bump at each other. It's the same way. You turn two magnets, the same pole, they'll push apart. But if you have electron and positron, because they are oppositely charged, they will attract and collide, and they will annihilate each other. So there will be lots of boom. It's like a magnum flash type of effect. So this is what and I call this annihilationist theory. They say that sin and God, they're completely opposite. So a sinner comes into the presence of God, and it's going to be poof, and a sinner disappears. Well, I had my friend who read this theory, and he said, well, I really like it, because now I know if I drink vodka, listen to heavy metal, and use drugs, at the end of all of it, I'll just poof, and that's it. So I can continue doing it, which causes, of course, the opposite. The defenders of everlasting torment view, when they hear someone trying to challenge this view or question, they will go on defensive and they'll say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you doing to our children? If there is, in other words, to them, the everlasting torment is a deterrent. You need to hear about the perspective of everlasting torment, and when you hear about the everlasting torment, it will deter you from being sinful. I wish so. You know it's not happening. So we need to look at the Bible rather than the philosophy. Instead of trying to use philosophical thinking to defend the justice of God or pedagogical ways to deter children from sinning, let's actually study in the Bible what is eternal punishment or torment supposed to mean. Well, here is another example. The book of Revelation talks about those who take the mark of the beast will also drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented. Here, see, this is why I took this. The same word. If here, New American, it's King James Bible here in Matthew 25 says punishment. But it's the same Greek word as here. And here, it's definitely both King James and New King James and New American Standard are using the word tormented. Will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will go up forever and ever. They will have no rest day and night. Those who worship the beast and image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Oh, that's pretty vivid, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. So, how can we talk about annihilationism in this case? I think in this text, there is no room for soft exit. Make no mistake. My friend did make a mistake. He believed somebody like Graham Maxwell and concluded he'll be just poof. No, it's not poof here. Make no mistake. There is no way how you can, out of the verse like this, make just a simple poof. It's not going to happen. Tormented with the fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels. Folks, it is serious. It is serious. Well, here it is. Here we go again. The Bible facts. It's Revelation 20 verse 10. And the devil who received them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophets are also, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. And by the way, we studied yesterday about the lake of fire. This is what happens. This is Revelation 20. This is after the second resurrection. This is after millennium. It means everybody who is not recorded in the book of life is going to join devil and a false prophet. And by the way, what we just read in Matthew 25:46, go ye to the in Matthew 25, go ye to the everlasting fire prepared for the devil. That's the everlasting fire described here. Revelation 20 verse 10. This is that lake of fire. This is Gehenna. This is not a puff. This is something much more potent. On the other hand, what are you going to do with these? We have issue. Look, for example, at Malachi. Malachi chapter 4, verse 1. For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be chaff. And the day that is coming will set them ablaze, says the Lord, so that it will not leave them neither root nor branch. On the other hand, Revelation 20, we just read it. The devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. You see, on the one side of the slide here is Malachi. On the other is John. Who is more inspired? Or Malachi? We got a problem here, folks. We got a problem. Malachi said that the arrogant and evildoer will be like chaff, and they will be set ablaze, so nothing is left of them. And John says, tormented day and night forever and ever. What are we going to do with that? This is the problem. And I think the suggestion is correct. We need to take a more close look at the phrase forever and ever. That's what we need to really take a close look. Because yes, on the one hand, it doesn't look like a poof. On the other hand, what is it going to be? So let's take a look. First of all, let's look for a definition of everlasting. The smallest epistle in the New Testament belonged to the Apostle Jude, and it says, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and their cities around them, since they were in the same way as these indulged in gross immorality and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing punishment of eternal fire. It's the same, folks, it's the same Greek word here as in Matthew 25. Go ye accursed into everlasting fire. So, and by the way, Jude is very clear. Make no mistake. Yet in the same way, this man also by dreaming defile the flesh and reject the authority and revile angelic majesties. So what Jude is saying is that the same punishment that was exerted upon Sodom and Gomorrah would be exerted on those who are preaching about the defilement of flesh and so forth. So, and the punishment is called everlasting fire. Well, some of you went with me in Jordan to look at the consequences of Sodom and Gomorrah. So those of you who endured this saw the molten rock and the burnt granite. Which temperature melts granite?
Thousands and thousands of degrees.
Think about 3,000, no less than 3,000 to melt the granite. You can have this thing in the crater of volcano, but guess what? There are plenty of evidences of seismic activity around the Dead Sea, but we don't have any single evidence of any volcanic activity.
2,300 degrees Fahrenheit.
23, thank you. So, 2,300 degrees was, and not from volcano. To me, I was looking for this specific place for many years because I was asking different tour guides in Jordan to show me this place, and they would not go there. They would take me to some other places, and the reason why, because these guys, some of them are Arab Christians, some of them are Arab Muslims. When they train to be guides, they just take, they talk about the Bible as a part of history. They take the textbook, which are assigned to them by university, which trains them to be a guide, and they just study it. Well, I know most of the textbooks for these purposes are written by very liberal theologians and or scholars who completely reject the historicity of the narrative of Genesis. So to them, the Dead Sea was formed over the millions of years as a result of a rift between two platforms, African and Middle Eastern. So they do not accept what the Bible talks happened in these places. So when I ask about them, they'll take me one place, which is some kind of monastery or the other. But thanks God, it was my birthday gift last year. That particular guide knew exactly what I was looking for, and she took us to the Cave of Lot, a place called Soko. We don't know if it was Lot there, but she took us exactly where you could see a molten granite sticking from underground. So, there was a high temperature impact there. And not from volcano. An earthquake cannot do that. Earthquake does not produce high temperature impact on the top of the mountain. So, maybe we should not be rejecting the biblical narrative and interpret the appearance of the molten granite in accordance with the story of God outpouring the fire and brimstone upon Sodom and Gomorrah. And by the way, that's what's called everlasting or eternal fire. So I touched this granite. It wasn't anymore burning. So that should probably give us a little food for thought in regard to what the everlasting fire is meant in the Bible. Well, of course, the proponents of the theory of everlasting torture, they are, of course, talking about the everlasting torture of the soul, which, of course, we studied the Bible enough to understand that the Bible is very clear, Jesus especially is very clear, that in the fire, both soul and body are going to be thrown. It's very clear. This is why Revelation chapter 20 is speaking about the second resurrection. And only after the resurrection, the wicked are going into the lake of fire. So we know for a fact that the idea of souls of sodomites burning in hell right now is not going to fly based on the Bible. More so, if you know a little bit about the people who lived in Sodom and Gomorrah, based on Genesis chapter 13, they are called Rephaim. And about them, the book of Job speaks that Rephaim are sleeping under the waters. And the book of Isaiah chapter 14 talks about Rephaim being in Sheol and being awakened. So the guys are still sleeping, waiting for their destiny. But the towns are definitely subject of everlasting fire, because that's what it says. It doesn't say the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. It just says Sodom and Gomorrah. And by the way, if you have any doubts, the same is spoken by Peter. 1 Peter 2:6 says, if he condemned the cities, exactly the same wording, of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes. Folks, putting Jude and Peter together is our answer to the initial problem. Why Malachi says the fire is going to burn and the evildoers will be like a chaff. And John says they'll throw into the lake of fire forever and ever. And how come it doesn't contradict?
They can't stop, drop, and roll.
Because what happened is the everlasting fire in Jude, which befell upon Sodom and Gomorrah, according to Peter, produced ashes. So this is to tell us that, of course, the poof theory doesn't work. But the theory about something being burning for the infinite amount of time doesn't work either. There has to be some middle ground. And the middle ground is definitely a time which takes for a certain thing from being ignited to be reduced to ashes. And of course, I'm not going to try to talk to you about the physics of the lake of fire described in Revelation chapter 20, verse 10 and 15. But the analogy which I bring about something being ignited and between ignition and burned to ashes, it's not a magnum flash phenomena. We're not into the magnum rapid explosion situation where a sinner won't feel anything, just sees and evaporates. No, this is not what's going to happen. But the infinite amount of time doesn't seem to be flying here either. So why are they using this term forever and ever? Why is this so, used? And that's confusing. So let me share with you some Greek. The English word forever, or forever and ever, or day and night forever and ever, is a translation of the Hebrew word aionos. The Greek word aionos. That's what appears in the book of Revelation. Guess what? If you do a search through the concordance, and that's what these computers can do now, it can send me back to the Greek translation of the Old Testament known as the Septuagint, where I will discover that the Greek word aionos translates Hebrew word olam. What is olam? Oh, olam is a very interesting term. You can, and those of you who attend here regularly, you know, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha-olam. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of universe or eternity. It can be either interchangeable. Guess what? Albert Einstein was a good Jewish boy. And he discovered a time-space continuum. We are three-dimensional, but everything is four-dimensional, right? The fourth dimension being time, which we cannot see with our eyes. But that's the solution. Aionos in the New Testament is having exactly the same notion. It can be related to time or it can be related to space. Look at some of the examples of, I pulled out every example in the New Testament where the word aionos occurs. And it occurs in a nice chapter in the Epistle of Hebrews. Hebrews 1 verse 2. It says, "In these days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also made aionos." And this is New American Standard Bible. You see the three footnote here. If you open the original book where it's taken, you will see that footnote says world or ages. It's both ways. Hebrews 11:3. By faith we understand that worlds, again, footnote, goes back, aionos, goes back, ages. It's the same word. So there's no contradiction between John and Malachi. There is no contradiction between Malachi and Matthew 25, verse 46. It's all Ionos, 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 which can mean time or can mean space. If it is space, it means the scale of destruction, not the time of suffering, but the scale of suffering. Totality. No return. God is not a bloodthirsty monster. God is not gonna let the wicked easy off the hook. Make no mistake about this. But He has no goal for us to enjoy the life forever with some corner of this universe where there will be somebody screaming forever of pain. This is not going to bring any closure. The only closure is brought only when something is irreversible. And that's what the lake of fire is. It will do its work. It will torment its people. By the way, going back to Revelation 14, those who accept the mark of the beast will be tormented forever and ever in front of the Lamb. It was a torment. If you look in the book of Revelation, chapter 16, the 7 last plague, that's what this everlasting torment is all about. It talks about the boils and wounds coming up with the first bowl of God's wrath poured out, the first angel, and it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. And these bowls of divine wrath are thrown upon those who have mark of the beast. So there's no proof in this. 7 plagues, the same way as 10 plagues of Egypt. It wasn't fun, but it will stop. The 7 plagues of the wrath of God stopped with the coming of Jesus. So, Revelation chapter 16 is a good demonstrator of the balanced approach to divine judgment. There's not going to be easy way out. The people who accept the mark of the beast will suffer badly for their desire to kill those who don't want to worship the beast. They will pay the price. Bible is clear. Together with all evil in this world.
And this is after the second resurrection.
Yes. After the second, the 7 last plagues were, of course, before the second coming. But the wording is the same. So, after the second resurrection, there will be torment. It's not just going to be happening infinite amount of time. It will be an execution of the just verdict handed down by a fairest judgment in the world to the evildoers. And they'll pay the price. The evildoers like Hitler, the evildoers like all these dictators, and all these cruel people, the maniacs, the sociopaths, they will be given their fair harsh but fair punishment.
Who will be the judge and jury back then? Is it Christ? and the Son?
Well, the main judge, of course, is the Lord our God, King of the universe or King of eternity, whichever you choose. His name, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, indicates the everlasting existence. But the jury, of course, will be all the universe, the angels, and even from the human race. We read in the book of Revelation that possible, like there were 24 elders. When we studied the subject here at Beit Shalom Balawav, there is a good possibility that these 24 elders are those who were raised from the dead at the time of the resurrection of Jesus.
Who were persecuted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have enough. We have a good jury pool. The verdict will be fair, and nobody will question it. But the Lord God is not going to go through to the extent of cruel and unusual punishment. There is a difference. And so the question, of course, arises, what is the meaning of some of the scenes described in the Bible? We did look at the scene of Sheol, but how about scene described in the parable of rich man and Lazarus? Well, this question will be answered after the short break.
I have a question. What's going to happen when we have the torment of the